The data in your business is worth hundreds of millions of dollars and you don't even know it yet. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what data that we're using right now to the same data that we've used to build multiple 8-figure companies and the one that we're using right now to build a 9-figure company. And in this video, you're going to learn exactly how to find the data in your business. And then once you get that data, what to do with the data to be able to make good decisions so that you can scale your business. Let's begin. So in terms of data in your business, there's two different types of businesses. There's demand-constrained businesses and there's supply-constrained businesses. And what I mean by that is if you are a demand-constrained business, that means there is only so much revenue that you can get by doing marketing, or it's a very competitive landscape. An example of this would be a marketing agency. There's a lot of marketing agencies out there. Margins are usually low, and it's harder to get customers than it is to fulfill on them sometimes. The inverse of this would be a cleaning company. Cleaning company, you can probably get customers really easily, but servicing those customers becomes increasingly difficult because you can get the customers, but finding the people to fulfill on the work is an example of a supply-constrained business. And so depending on which constraint that you are working with in your business will determine what area you're going to focus on leading your data. So let's say that we're in a demand-constrained business and you are having to really focus a lot of your efforts on sales. That means the real core of the business is actually selling, so you're going to want to put more emphasis onto the data that you're looking for in sales. An example of this is we work with some agencies that ask us, and the founders are curious on how they can grow and scale. We were working with one founder that had never pretty much tracked anything ever. He was just like, well, we were doing good enough. I didn't think we needed to track. So he didn't know how much they were spending on ads, didn't know how much that they were converting those leads, as well as how many people were showing up to calls. And so he said, great, let's go ahead and break this down for you and let's figure out what it makes sense for you to measure. And the way that we did that was we had a couple different metrics that we measured. One of them was customer acquisition cost. That's CAC. But what's part of customer acquisition cost? There's a couple different things. So it could be how much you're spending on ads. That could be one thing. It could be how many people end up showing up to your calls. It could be how many of those calls are you converting. Conversion rate. So you have ads, you have show up rate, and then you have conversions. And so that's an example of how you can get, these are multiple data points that you can get, and you can decide how focused that you want to. It's like if you have a camera that you are trying to focus on something near versus far, or if you just look with your eyes and try to focus on something near, you're not gonna be able to focus on something far. Similarly, if you look at something far away and you try to focus on, and that you're focusing on the thing that's far away, the thing that's really close comes a little bit out of vision. Now, it's just to illustrate a point here, you can focus on different layers of your data. And so as an example, to even break this down even further, you can have another layer of data here with even more data points. But you may not want to pay attention to it because you want to focus on the relevant layer of data for you in that time. And this also depends on the constraint you're going with. So as an example, if ads is the problem or the constraint that you're focusing on right now, then you probably shouldn't be focusing your efforts on sales. And in order to find the constraint, you have to actually get all the data to begin with. But how granular do you want to get? And that's usually what we, kind of the question that has to come. So in this case, for the agency that was a demand constraint business, not a supply constraint, we said the most important thing is getting new customers right now. So we're going to focus on getting new customers. The way that we did that was we started measuring everything ad related. We measured how many leads they were getting, how much they were spending on ads. Then we also measured how many people were, so that was just generating the actual leads. That gave us a good idea of, are we on the right track, are we on the wrong track? The next layer that the next thing that we can, now as an example, you can also do this by department. So customer acquisition cost is, let's just say that this is the actual line here, and then you're kind of moving into sales. And then you can move into fulfillment or another metric later. So right here, you see that this is ad-related metrics, the data that we're looking at for ads. The next level to that, after we started looking at the cost per lead, as well as the cost per book call, then we're going to move into the sales metrics. And what are the numbers? As an example, show-up rate would probably be in sales, but how many people are showing up to those calls? How many people are actually booking in calls? So if we generate 100 leads, what percentage of those? Is it only 30% of the people that actually book, that actually end up going forward with us, end up booking with us? Okay, well, that's all right. That's a little bit on the low end. But if of those 30% of the people, so if you have 100 people that are leads, and then you get another, those 30 people that show up, that's 30%, or there's 30% people who book, let's say 50% of those end up showing up. So you're now left with 15 people from your initial 100 people in leads. That's an example of a sales metric. And then you could get even more granular. If you wanted to go one level deeper, you could say, okay, what times of day are people showing up versus not showing up? Are there days that are higher show up rates versus lower show up rates? Are there things that we do to improve the show up rate versus the decrease the show up rate? And there's all different things that you can do to play with this. As an example, sending custom videos or connecting with them on LinkedIn, socials, whatever it may be, sending them marketing materials ahead of time, giving them goodies for just showing up on the call. These are examples of how we broke down the metrics in the business. And at first, it's like, oh my goodness, how do I track these things? I have so many numbers. And we really didn't have a good solution. We weren't going to spend a ton of money on software. So at first, we just wanted to get the minimum viable product in. And the first thing that we did was we just used a spreadsheet, and it was all manual. Is that ideal? No, it's not perfect at all. But you got to start somewhere, and something is better than nothing. And so oftentimes when we want to go in and actually start putting effort and just start tracking things, we'll use a spreadsheet. Even though it's manual, I'll say, hey, I want this metric on my desk, maybe literally, maybe metaphorically, on my desk by the end of the day, each day, so that I can actually track this thing and we can see where we want to improve. And you can do this all across your business. In this case, we had a spreadsheet that had lead generation. We had show up rates that was just like nurturing people. And then we had sales. So we were, how many of those leads were we converting? And those were all different metrics that we were looking at independently. And then we'd also look at when we sold them, how much money were they paying up front versus how much were we contracting? So cash collected up front versus contracted. That way we could figure out what our cash flow looked like. And cash flow is really important because it allows you to know how much you can scale. So if your customer acquisition cost is $1,000 and you collect $2,000 up front, that means you can spend that money immediately that month on paying Facebook or Google or whatever your ad platform is, cold email, to get another customer. So that's an example. Once you have as much data, as much relevant data, as well as separating how important that data is, the next thing you're going to move on to is an OODA loop. And so this is, you have a snapshot, you have a picture or you have a picture of your business. The next thing is an OODA loop. So what is an OODA loop? O-O-D-A. Observe, orient, decide, act. So, and it's actually, this is from the military, specifically fighter pilots. Observe, orient, decide, act. And this is constantly happening, and it can be happening as much as possible. Now, as an example, Facebook does this when you run ads. So what I mean by that is, Facebook is essentially a really advanced AI algorithm. And so when you put an ad in front of someone, this is an example of Facebook observes the action of the user. And in this case, I put an ad in front of someone. They either click on it or they don't, or they engage with it or they don't. And so Facebook is observing, okay, no one's clicking on this ad, or people, men are clicking on this ad, but women aren't clicking on this ad. Okay, so we're going to want to show it to more men. That's an example of observing. You're orienting yourself on the data. Is it because generally when you have large swaths of data, it can get a little bit easier. As an example, if your customer acquisition cost is going way up, but it's just Christmas time and a lot of people are spending on ad platforms, that means the costs are naturally going to go up. That's an example of orienting yourself on the decision of like, wait a second, maybe something's not broken, maybe it's just normal time of the year behavior. Or let's say that you're selling a summer product in winter, you may not have the most sales. What's happening? It's like, okay, well, the weather's not too good right now to be able to sell this product. So that's an example of orienting yourself based off of the data that you're looking at. So you're observing, you're orienting yourself in the data, then you're deciding what to do. Let's go back to our Facebook example. So Facebook observes that more men are clicking on this ad. There may not be so much orientation in this example. Then it decides, I'm going to decide to show this to more men because more men are clicking on it. Therefore, we want our ad results to go up. So that's an example of it deciding. And then Facebook acts on that by putting it in front of more men. That's an example. So let's put in an example of your business. So let's say that your conversion rate's really low, and out of all of the metrics that you have, the conversion rate and actually how many people you're converting on a call is the one main constraint. You're going to observe, okay, What's going on here? Are we selling to the right person? Do we have the right people getting on the calls? Is there something in our advertising that is misselling? Let's say that you are selling umbrellas, and by the time they get on a sales call, you're selling them beach balls. They might be a little confused and they might not be converting. So maybe you should put beach balls in the ad so that people who want beach balls are actually going to get to your sales conversations. So you're orienting yourself based off of the data, because this is not just an isolated thing, it's affected by everything else around it. You're deciding, okay, I'm going to fix the advertising so that I can get a higher conversion rate. Or let's say that maybe I need to sell them more sales materials ahead of time so they come more prepared. Or let's just say that we need to actually train and drill sales with all the reps so that we make sure that we can start converting more of these leads. And then so you're deciding, all right, we're going to work on sales training. That's what we're going to do. And then you act, and you actually act on what you decided that you're going to do. And this can happen all the time. If you're doing enough volume, it can happen daily. If you're kind of on a lower cycle, it may happen monthly or weekly. With Facebook, this is probably happening if you're spending thousands of dollars a day on ads. This is probably happening every second. Facebook is observing, orienting, deciding, and acting based off of the data that it gets. And so Facebook is a really powerful platform. It's essentially an AI machine learning platform. And so the same way that that makes decisions and makes decisions very well, you should also be making decisions in a very similar way when it comes to the metrics in your business and deciding, what am I going to measure? As an example, mostly in business, it comes down to marketing, sales, operations, maybe some sort of fulfillment. Those are the main things that you're going to want to do. And finance as well, which is kind of a function of like the operations, right? So those are things that you can track, and then you can decide, what are the metrics here that we're getting back? And it goes front to back in terms of measuring metrics, because it's a little bit easier usually to measure the front end metrics than it is to measure the back end metrics, so that you can kind of map out where the customer goes. Because the customer starts with an ad, whether it's on newspaper, radio, Facebook, wherever it may be, they usually start with an ad, or it's maybe cold email or cold outreach. That's still a form of advertising. Then you're going to move to the next part and the next part and the next part. And then you just measure all of it as much as you can, as much as realistically possible. And like in the software world, customer acquisition to lifetime value is, if I had enough room here, I would put lifetime value. Those are examples of things that you can measure in your business, and then you can go deeper into those metrics and then optimize them from there. Hopefully this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to read all of your comments. And if you like this video, you probably also like this video as well.